Tonight, President Obama rebuked, and by his own party. The Democratic-controlled Congress blocks the shutdown of the prison camp at Guantanamo. I'm Katie Couric in Washington. Also tonight, frustration over the recession turns to anger and child abuse.
I went into her room with a spatula and spanked her.
Who's looking out for the children of the recession?
A child is left in an unsafe situation, and then they come in here critically ill.
And towns across America strapped for cash find creative ways to cut costs and the grass.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric reporting tonight from Washington.
And good evening, everyone. Well, if you're still counting, it happened on day 121 of the Obama administration, right behind me at the Capitol, the new president's first major legislative defeat. The Senate today followed the House in blocking the president from closing the prison camp at Guantanamo Bay because no member wants any of the detainees there sent to his or her home state or district. The vote in the Senate wasn't even close, 90-6. Chip Reid is at the White House. And Chip, all but 6 Democrats abandoned the president on this one.
Well, that's right, Katie. Democrats weighed appeals from the president on the one hand against anger from their constituents on the other, and the president lost in a big way.
These aren't common criminals. These are hardened killers bent on the destruction of the United States.
On Capitol Hill, a bipartisan chorus of "Not in my backyard."
We will never allow terrorists to be released into the United States.
By an overwhelming vote, the Senate today rejected the president's request for $80 million to close the prison at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, at least for now.
Once the administration has a plan, we'll consider closing Guantanamo, but not a second sooner.
The president will begin to lay out his plan tomorrow in a speech that, for symbolic effect, will be at the National Archives, where the Constitution is displayed. White House officials say they're confident he will eventually turn public opinion around.
He is not going to make any decision or any judgment that imperils the safety of the American people.
It's one of his top priorities. He signed the order to close the prison in his first week as president. Guantanamo, he says, tars the U.S. image around the world and is used as a recruiting tool by al-Qaeda. The prison houses 240 suspected terrorists. If it's closed, many could be transferred to the U.S., including about 20 high-ranking members of al-Qaeda. But the president's supporters say critics are fear-mongering.
The reality is we are holding some of the most dangerous terrorists in the world right now in our federal prisons.
Like the Supermax prison in Colorado, which holds, among others, shoe bomber Richard Reed and al-Qaeda member Zacarias Moussaoui.
It has 490 beds. They are reserved for the worst of the worst.
Today, the Attorney General said the president is not backing down.
And I think we will meet that goal that the president has set to close Guantanamo by late January of next year.
The president tomorrow will also defend his decision to revive the military commissions created by the Bush administration to prosecute prisoners at Guantanamo. Today, human rights leaders came here to the White House, met with the president, and tried to get him to change his mind. Sources tell CBS News they left deeply disappointed. Katie?
Chip Reid at the White House tonight. Chip, thank you. The president did get something he wanted from Congress today, but it came at a high cost for advocates of gun control. The House followed the Senate in approving the president's crackdown on credit card companies, but tagged onto that bill an amendment allowing people to carry concealed loaded guns in national parks and wildlife refuges. A big win for the NRA. Another major story, this one from overseas. Iran test-fired a missile today that's capable of reaching American bases in the Middle East and Israel. Here's our national security correspondent, David Martin.
If this is Iran's answer to President Obama's extended hand, then the chances of diplomacy heading off Iran's nuclear weapons program are not good. The Iranians claimed it was a success, and Defense Secretary Gates agreed.
That it was a successful flight test. The missile will have a range of approximately 2,000 to 2,500 kilometers.
That's 12 to 1,500 miles, more than enough to reach Israel and even parts of Europe. But the Iranians don't yet have a reliable weapon.
Because of some of the problems they've had with their engines, We think, at least at this stage of the testing, it's probably closer to the lower end of that range.
At the same time, Iran continues enriching uranium, although not yet to bomb-grade levels. The CIA estimates Iran could have a nuclear weapon sometime between 2010 and 15. But both the U.S. and Israel have launched covert operations designed to throw sand in the gears by supplying faulty parts or designs. And Secretary of State Clinton indicated Iran may be experiencing delays.
Recent analyses have suggested the timetable may be longer than what had originally been thought.
But John Hanna, National Security Advisor to former Vice President Cheney, says Iran's intent remains the same.
Clearly perfecting their delivery systems, racing full scale ahead on trying to get sufficient fissile material for a bomb.
But President Obama told Israel's prime minister he's prepared to give diplomacy several more months to produce results.
We should have a fairly good sense by the end of the year as to whether they are moving in the right direction.
U.S. officials are hoping for a more moderate government after elections in June, but the real powers in Iran are the mullahs, and they're not up for re-election. Katie?
David Martin reporting from the Pentagon tonight. In other news tonight, a long-awaited report is out on Ireland's Roman Catholic reform schools. From the 1930s to the 90s, Irish officials sent troubled children to those schools, and thousands of them were savagely abused by priests, nuns, and others. As Mark Phillips reports, many victims say the report and official apologies are not enough.
Andrew Madden wanted to be a priest until he was abused by one.
It took the form of molestation most of the time.
Colin O'Gorman's whole life centered around the church.
The abuse and then rape continued for about 2.5 years until I fled.
Christine Buckley tried to tell the world what she was going through.
And for that, I received a beating which opened up my flesh on my left thigh.
Until now, the stories of what happened to children in Catholic residential schools in Ireland have been anecdotal. A government inquiry now confirms that for decades, until the schools were closed, children were abused in their thousands. Exact figures are impossible because of missing records. But the abuse was a cruel, systematic catalog of perversion. Boys were molested and regularly raped. Girls were beaten, flogged, kicked, burned, held underwater. The rare, brave complaints were ignored or hushed up. Offending priests and nuns were shunted around the system, many sent to America.
When you take people into a state-regulated, statutory system of care, whether it's right or wrong to subject them to such detention, you owe them a duty to take proper care of them.
For years, the church claimed the abuse was a bad apple problem. Now that excuse is gone. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of bad apples who were systematically hidden by the church so they could abuse again. Faced with the evidence, all one of the religious orders accused in the report could do is apologize.
Today is a day really of shame, as far as I am concerned, for our congregation, indeed for the church, and for the community in general.
A day for shame, but not prosecution. A church-led court action kept all of the abusers' names out of the report. Victims' groups say they may have some vindication, but not justice. Mark Phillips, CBS News, Dublin.
Turning now to the flu outbreak, officials in Utah say a 22-year-old man who had the H1N1 virus died today, the 9th flu-related death in this country. What makes this flu so unusual is the severity with which it attacks young people. Now experts think they know why. Here's Dr. John LaPook.
The CDC confirmed today that the older you are, the better your chances of avoiding serious illness from the H1N1 flu. Of 164 patients hospitalized with the virus, 29% were ages 5 to 18, 37% were 19 to 49, and only 13% were over 50. One possible reason? The history of the flu virus in this country. From 1918 until 1957, it was mostly type H1N1, perhaps a distant relative of today's new strain. In 1957, it switched to a different type. So it's possible that older people were more likely to be exposed to H1N1 and therefore may have some immunity to the current strain.
It is likely that they have some protection against this new
swine H1N1 viruses.
And there may be more immunity found in another chapter of our flu history. Back in 1976, more than 40 million Americans were vaccinated against a type of H1N1 swine flu for a feared epidemic that never materialized.
This is potentially good news because more people may have immunity to this new flu than doctors thought. Dr. John LaPook, CBS News, New York.
And coming up next on the CBS Evening News, this tough economy leads to a rise in child abuse. Our special series, Children of the Recession, continues. The stress of the recession on American families is pushing some to the breaking point. Calls to a domestic violence hotlines are up 21%, and often children are the victims. In an online survey of law enforcement officials, nearly 9 out of 10 said child abuse and neglect has increased or will because of this recession. In partnership with USA Today, Sandra Hughes continues our series, CBS Reports, Children of the Recession.
In the emergency room at Phoenix Children's Hospital, they're used to treating some of the worst cases of child abuse. But pediatric nurse practitioner Amy Terreros is shocked what's coming through the doors these days.
We've really seen an increase, not only in the number of cases that we've seen, but in the severity of the cases.
Bite marks everywhere. Face, his arm, his foot.
Terreros and her team are being overwhelmed by a spike in the number of cases. In the first 4 months of this year, they've seen abuse cases increase 40% over the same time last year, from 45 in 2008 to 63 in 2009.
The numbers are going up, and some of the families, that what they're telling us tells me that the economy is playing a part in it.
The recession is hit especially hard here in Phoenix. Housing prices have dropped 50%. Foreclosures have left neighborhoods looking like ghost towns.
Recently, 2 of the cases that I had, it was a father who was normally the one working, who all of a sudden lost his job, and he was now the primary caretaker for the child, and he had never been in that role. And then the children came in with injuries.
And in that particular case, what was the explanation? He just lost it?
There was no explanation. It's still denial.
When caregivers' explanations don't match the injuries, Terreros and her team work like detectives, looking at scans and x-rays to tell the child's story. And what they uncover can be upsetting.
So this poor kid was walking around with a broken arm?
Well, he probably wouldn't have been walking if you go and look at the next slides. This is his other arm. Again, you see all this new bone here that's forming around that fracture.
2 broken arms.
2 broken arms. This is his left leg. And you can see here, again, he has an old fracture there. And also on his right leg, he did.
2. It almost makes me cry. The spike in child abuse cases isn't isolated to Phoenix. At children's hospitals across the country, there's growing alarm.
At Boston Children's Hospital, the number of cases screened rose 20% last year. At Seattle's Children's Hospital, a 27% increase in confirmed cases. In Beaufort, South Carolina, a 63% increase so far this year. All believe the economy is playing a major role. These children are among the statistics, and this is their mother.
Sometimes I have to walk away because I know if I would start to hit one of them, it probably wouldn't stop.
She's a single mother of 4 who doesn't want to be identified and says after losing her home to foreclosure, she became abusive and gave her daughter a black eye.
And I went into her room with a spatula and spanked her. I had to hold her down on the ground to do it, and I had to use more force than I've ever had to use on any of my kids.
She's now in counseling to control her anger despite her financial situation. But some experts say it's not economic stress leading to an increase in child abuse cases, but better reporting by the hospitals. But there is no denying that vital funding to prevent child abuse is drying up. Several states have already made cutbacks to programs this year.
Is that my nose?
Like the Crisis Nursery in downtown Phoenix, which must now turn away children in families considered to be high risk.
And we have a waiting list of probably 50 to 70 youngsters whose parents want their kids to be here.
What's going to happen to my granddaughters when they do come back, if they go back?
Eva Estes was awarded temporary custody of her granddaughters after the state separated them from their parents because of drug use and neglect, a claim their mother denies. Estes is worried about the girls going back to live with their mother.
Is anybody from CPS going to check on them once a week, once a month, if ever?
She has reason for concern. Budget cuts forced a 15% reduction in Child Protective Services staff. That's 159 case workers. Now, low-level complaints, often the first sign of abuse, will be ignored.
Nobody's going to go check out to make sure those kids are okay?
And believe me, that was a gut-wrenching decision to make. Nobody wanted to make that decision, but it was necessary.
Back at Phoenix Children's Hospital, they know exactly what these cuts could mean, and they feel powerless.
A child is left in an unsafe situation, and then they come in here critically ill.
Her team can only heal the immediate wounds. The long-term scars will last far beyond the recession. Sandra Hughes, CBS News, Phoenix.
And for more on preventing child abuse, you can go to cbsnews.com and you'll find a list of organizations and programs that can help. Meanwhile, tomorrow, The Early Show hosts a town meeting for kids. Experts will answer their questions about the economy. And here on the evening news, they live in a motel. What is it like for kids to be homeless in America? And coming up next tonight, the recession from a different vantage point, how local governments are getting creative. These are tough times for state and local governments. All over America, officials are looking for ways to save. And Richard Schlesinger tells us they've come up with some bright ideas, or as we call them, bright spots.
This is ridiculous.
How much would you pay for all the quarters and all the parking meters in all of Chicago for the next 75 years?
I ended up putting 7 quarters in the meter.
One company paid close to $1.2 billion to the cash-strapped city to take over the meters. Good deal for Chicago, which had a $469 million deficit for just this year. Bad deal for parkers. Rates will double in some areas.
We don't have to like it, but it may be that that's all they have.
Cities are getting creative, looking to raise or save as much as they can wherever they can. The Palm Bay, Florida police weren't really thinking about money when they began a pilot program to use paragliders for search and rescue. They sure are cheaper than helicopters.
The cost to actually fly is roughly about $2.50 an hour to have this in the air.
You have to see what's out there, always exploring new alternatives and new ideas.
This is Hempstead, New York Town Supervisor Kate Murray's newest idea, Nigerian dwarf goats. They're just babies now, but they'll soon be grazing and grooming one city park. More environmentally friendly and a lot cheaper than human groundskeepers.
No housing costs either, and as employees, we don't even have to give them health benefits.
And that's one reason the town supervisor says she's bullish on these goats. It's all in how you look at things. Look at these stolen and abandoned bikes in Ewing Township, New Jersey. You may see junk.
I see money. I do.
Mayor Jack Ball auctioned them off at govdeals.com, a sort of eBay for towns with a surplus of stuff and a deficit of dough. He got $1,700 for them.
That's found money. Yes. Yes, it is.
The last thing mayors want to do is raise taxes in tough times. So if trash can be turned into treasure or quarters into billions, even a kid knows it's worth looking into. Richard Schlesinger, CBS News, Hempstead, New York.
This Bright Spots is sponsored by Priority Mail Flat Rate Boxes, only from the Postal Service. A simpler way to ship.
Finally tonight, if no one said it before, well then, we'll say it for the first time. There's something very right about a kid on a bike. Bicycles and childhood just go together. And Mark Strassman tells us there's a program aimed at making sure no child is left behind.
I need you to stay in the straight lines. Now use those brakes.
They're all riding a dream.
Pedal and brake. Pedal and brake, okay?
A chance to pedal and brake on their very own bike.
Swing it out, Aaron.
15-year-old Aaron Woods and his 8-year-old sister, Skylar. like all the kids here trying to impress Mr. Terry.
Excellent job, excellent job.
42-year-old Terry Lansdell, a professional rider for 15 years, runs the Trips for Kids program in Charlotte.
Every one of these donated.
Every one of these donated.
Bikes that often show years of neglect.
We have rusty bikes, yes. We have dusty bikes. We like dusty bikes.
Volunteers recycle them. Some are sold. And the profits pay not to give kids a bike, but to let them earn one.
Open the lever. What do we do next?
In 6 hours of required classes, they learn the bike's parts and how they work.
Locking nut.
And safety.
Okay, so the helmet's sitting back there.
Wear your helmet, okay?
Over 3 years, 200 kids have left with a bike, often from families like Aaron and Skylar's struggling financially.
Money is a factor, yes.
And without this program, would they have bikes?
No.
But Skylar does.
Hop up on the saddle there for me, Skylar.
And Aaron?
You like that one? This is just perfect.
Perfect for doing tricks.
Like a grown man looks at a car, he says, yeah, man, that's my car. I worked and paid for that car, you know? So that's the same thing with me for this bike that I'm getting.
Pride in ownership. It's part of the lesson Terry Lansdell is teaching.
And to see him ride for the first time, that's good stuff. That's why I'm here.
Very good, very good.
Mark Strassman, CBS News, Charlotte.
And what a great idea. That is the CBS Evening News for tonight. With thanks to the Jones Day Law Firm for this view of the Capitol, I'm Katie Couric. Good night.